Wow, it has been a long time. I'm not talking about how long I've been away from making videos on YouTube. No, I mean how long it's been since I last thought about Resident Evil 3. Resident Evil 3 Nemesis, or Last Escape out in Japan, is quite the unfortunate entry in the series. When it was released back in 1989, it shook the world, but was later looked back by some fans of the series as the black sheep of the mainline games. There are quite a few reasons as to why it garnered that reputation, one of them being how it wasn't meant to be a mainline game. It was supposed to be a spin-off, but when development of the original RE3 eventually led to it being planned for next-generation hardware, specifically to PS2, Capcom decided to give the reins for the next mainline game to this unfortunate spin-off team. So now what was meant to be a small side game now had to be reworked into the next numbered entry to this up-and-coming blockbuster of a franchise. You can imagine how rough things got for this team, especially considering Resident Evil 2 came out only 1 year prior. They scrambled to get this game together, extreme crunch was taken, but it all paid off in the end as Resident Evil 3 was released in the fall of 1999 to major praise from critics and gamers alike. But that was back in 1999. Jump to years later, after games like Resident Evils 4 and 5 came out, the series was seen as taking a major leap into the action genre, straying away from its survival horror roots, and some people started to hate the current games because of it, even going on to hating RE3 just because it was far more action-focused than the other classic games. But thankfully, they simmered down and it still had its fans and defenders, and Resident Evil 3 was still beloved and looked back fondly by them. As time went on, Capcom slowly shifted Resident Evil back closer to its survival horror roots, starting slowly with the Revelations games and making its major step with Resident Evil 7 Biohazard. Eventually, what was to be the Resident Evil 2 remake, announced in 2015, later releasing in 2019 as a reimagining rather than a remake, the question came up about the possibility of Resident Evil 3 getting the reimagining treatment. Many were excited about the prospect of this news as they loved the reimagining of Resident Evil 2. Others, like myself, were indifferent as thoughts of the reimagining of RE2 were mixed from us, since it wasn't a remake in the same way Resident Evil 1's remake was back in 2002. Hell, even the Resident Evil 1 remake is now being called by some as a remaster despite the numerous additions added onto the game rather than altered. Capcom wanted to hear fan support for a reimagined Resident Evil 3, and the fans delivered, causing a massive outcry of support from fans across Twitter, Reddit, and other sites across the web. Capcom listened, and much later in 2019, it was revealed Resident Evil 3 was in fact getting a reimagining. It would later be released in April of 2020 to very positive to mixed reception. While the game has plenty of fans, there seems to be quite a number of people who dislike the game, mainly due to the fact that the game feels less like a remake and more like a reimagining. Wait, hold up. Now you're calling it a reimagining? I was talking about this with Resident Evil 2 a year ago and people were getting furious at me like I pissed in their cereal or insulted their family name. What's so different with this compared to the Resident Evil 2 reimagining? Oh, wait, I see what they mean. Because the game was drastically different. Many of the aspects of the original game have been completely cut or are unrecognizable. Now, normally, I would also be very upset about cut content like that, but in all honesty, I was expecting a reimagining that didn't have the same content of the original, and that's what I got. The story for the game is no different from the original. Jill Valentine from Resident Evil 1 is trying to escape Raccoon City amidst a zombie outbreak. Along the way, she meets up with Carlos Oliveira, a member of the Umbrella Biohazard Countermeasure Service, or UBSC for short, along with his fellow comrades as they all try to make their way out of the city. All the while, Jill is being hunted by an Umbrella BOW named Nemesis, who is not only just hunting her, but any other members of STARS remaining in Raccoon City. The pressure is on as Jill fights her way through the decimated streets of the city in order to escape from the nightmare of her former home. It's nothing very special, but it's packed with some solid moments throughout, albeit with an odd use of a line far too early on. It gets the job done of having a serviceable tale to tell, though.
You creepy ass stalker. You want stars? I'll give you stars.
Aw, not now! Don't say it now! Say it later! Really, my only complaint with the story is there are some new additions included in the reimagining, but they sadly don't really add to the story in any good way. It just feels more like fan service in the end of the day. Visually, it's not too different from Resident Evil 2's reimagining. I did notice some weird texture issues where textures would not load up fast enough, thus many of them would end up looking very blurry up close.
Oh, that looks really bad up close.
Now, the sound is something I actually had issues with in the previous reimagining. One major complaint I have was there was next to no music playing anywhere throughout the game. It's even worse since there is music that plays, but it is so rare and seldom heard, you sometimes forget there was supposed to be a save room theme outside the one time a portion of it played in a save room. It makes the classic soundtrack pack all the better to turn on just so you have some nice ambient tunes to listen to throughout the journey. Resident Evil 3, thankfully, has added much more music that actually plays during gameplay, with some cool tense pieces and action-packed tunes that fit the moments. Just some nice stuff that helps a lot. And while sadly the Nemesis music isn't as noteworthy as in the original, there is... save room music! Oh, thank the Lord. I can't even tell you how much I missed this in RE2. Hearing it this time in this game was awesome. It was great. This music adds so much, I can't even describe it. This whole save room theme just reminds you that the escape is still on. You're safe for now. And it's also good to know your music isn't bugged out or absent from the game. Now for the gameplay, and boy do I have plenty to say here. RE3 always had quite a bit of action compared to the other entries in the classic games, but this one was able to translate most of it well with the third-person shooting. While I personally think you should not be able to move while shooting, as that can really ruin a lot of the tension and the horror of the game, they really balance things out well here with the areas and enemies you fight. Since the game is a reimagining, these areas really feel like they were made for the gameplay they went with, in turn leading to many smooth, natural, and intense encounters. And hey, the knife is no longer a limited use item! In fact, you can even mash a button to take reduced damage if you're grabbed, like in the original games. Easily a giant step up from the previous game, which would force you to use a self-defense item to escape, and there was no way to take reduced damage from getting grabbed by zombies. While there were some annoying struggles here and there, being stun-locked by enemies to death, it thankfully happened seldom few times. Just make sure to exercise caution. One incredibly awesome returning feature from the original game is the dodging. Dodging in the original RE3 was very bizarre to say the least. If you had no clue how to correctly time your button presses, it would end up doing more harm than good, even if you knew when to do it. Ouch. But if you knew how to use it well, it was absolutely broken beyond words and becomes vital to achieving the best rank in the game. In this game, it returns, but with much more leeway that the original technically couldn't do. You can dodge at any time, but doing it twice in a row without a perfect dodge will leave you slow for a few moments. Now, that can help you get out of a tight spot, but a perfect will not only give you some temporary invulnerability when evading, but also allows you to hold down the ready weapon button to slow down time, auto-aiming for a headshot on the enemy you just evaded. This is such a welcome change from the original. The timing is much more lenient and you are given a nice bonus for evading. It's much more usable than the original game. While the dodging helps a lot, the lack of some enemy variety kinda sucks. You'll mainly be fighting zombies, but you will encounter other dangerous monsters that can really mess you up if you're not careful, especially those sneaky turrets who can do one-hit kills on you.
I'm dead. Did they spawn another one in the room with me? Damn it. Oh my god. Damn.
Yeah, definitely better keep your dodge finger ready or just overwhelm them ASAP. Something that was notable and beloved in the original game was the live selection system. It was a choose-your-own-adventure style system that actually offered a lot of variety to the game, as choosing an option could drastically alter how the story progresses and even change the ending. However, this system was cut from the game, which does suck, but since this is a reimagining and not a remake, I don't really mind it so long as the rest of the game can make up for any other... Wait, what? The clock tower and park got cut? Seriously? Wait, where the hell is the RPD? Oh, there it is. Halfway through the game instead of in the start. Damn, they took some serious creative liberties. There was a lot that was definitely altered in the game, much to the ire of others, but I don't mind it too much since the flow of this version of the game works well enough. Heck, they even expanded upon the hospital in this final area of the game. In fact, the whole final area is reimagined, and unfortunately much less horrifying than the original. If having that much stuff cut didn't already piss people off, having way less puzzles definitely would. While the cut or changed areas didn't greatly upset me, the lack of puzzles did. Thankfully the few in the game are really good, but there really is only a handful here, and they are not randomized like the original game, which would randomize puzzles on repeat runs, which hurts replayability, but it does make speedrunning easier. Items in boxes may sometimes be random, but that random element throughout the whole game is something that made it stand out compared to the others in the series. While these cuts were felt and will be missed, thankfully the game is fine-tailored and well-made throughout, so it all fits with its own take and reimagining of the original. One thing I was easily upset about upon starting the game was ink ribbons were nowhere to be found on the harder difficulties. In RE2 they included limited saves on harder modes, but not in RE3. As an old-school Resident Evil fan, I was bummed out, but then I realized why there was unlimited saving. Alright, just saved, time to head out, and... What the... Alright, guess I'll just go and... Seriously? Who the hell do they think are playing these games? There are so many save rooms in this entire game! It was the same way in the original, so what ended up happening is you'd be stocked up on so many ink ribbons, saving was of no severe consequence. So, in the end, I wasn't as upset with this change in the long run. Bosses in the game are limited to only encounters with Nemesis, but they are awesome! The fights all have something unique to them and aren't just traditional shoot the boss until it dies, though there are sequences in the fight where that does happen, which isn't an issue at all. They are really great fights, thankfully. However, on the topic of Nemesis, there is something that should be noted. To anyone who played the demo, remember how he would show up near the end of it? I hope you do, because that's the only time he shows up in an open area. Seriously, the whole reason people were excited for this reimagining was because of RE2's version of Mr. X, who acted like Nemesis from the original RE3, pursuing you throughout the police department non-stop. It was one of the best things about that game. So the thought of having that happen for the entire game was such a scary and awesome idea. Sadly, outside of scripted events or boss fights, Nemesis only appears one time in an open area where he will chase you constantly. It's a shame too, since he is such a terrifying foe to run from. He hits hard, can leap far, and can even shrug off hits from a car.
It's my turn, bitch!
Oh god, no, what am I gonna do?
It feels like they had a whole idea for him and how he'd act. But I guess once they got the memo that RE2 was no longer being a remake and doing its own thing, my guess is the RE3 team just did what they wanted to save on time. This really sucks in the long run because he was so paramount to what made Resident Evil 3. The dude even still drops items if you down him, so what the hell happened to him? This was easily the weakest part of the game for me, but even without being chased by Nemesis, I felt something that I didn't feel with RE2. That was having fun. While RE2 Reimagined was trying to be a remake but then shifted to being its own game, RE3 starts as its own game and ends with its own journey. It was different from the original, but I don't care since they didn't try to remake anything from the original. While there are signs they were going to at some points, they must have shifted fairly early on into a reimagining since almost nothing from the original game remains outside of the original character's story and name. I can't tell you how disappointed I was with Resident Evil 2 for having some incredible remade areas from the original and having too many other areas be reimagined, along with the gameplay as well. It all felt like complete ignorance of what the Resident Evil 1 remake set in stone for how a remake should be done. But Resident Evil 3 did let me down. It showed to me it was its own game, and I was able to welcome it with open arms. Sure, there was some cut gameplay elements and areas, but the short length of the game allowed for them to tailor one heck of a journey from start to finish. Not to mention, the original Resident Evil 3 wasn't a long game either, so it all works out in that regard. While the Mercenaries mode from the original was sadly cut, there is a neat bonus shop you unlock after finishing the game once, which allows you to unlock extra goodies for use in new game runs. You can unlock more points by completing in-game challenges that award concept art and 3D models. It's a nice way to keep people playing the game for repeat runs and unlocking more and more awesome extra weapons and bonuses. This is a great addition, and it really expands any future runs to making them faster or even having more bang for your buck. There are two additional harder difficulties, Nightmare and Inferno, which, wow, this is why the game was tolerable for most of the way. Both modes introduce harder, randomly placed enemies and random resource items. There are even some enemies who you fight later in the game who appear very early on in these modes. It really puts you on your toes as you flirt with danger and evasions to get through these new challenges. Unless you come in with a rocket launcher, then you'll just mop the floor with these undead clowns. As of making this review, I only finished a run on Nightmare, and while it was definitely harder, I felt like the final boss was, well...
Felt that, did you?
Absolute bullshit. Seriously, this dude gains the ability to stun lock you. Stun locking you? Like seriously? And you die in 2 hits unless you have the defense coins to give you an advantage in the fight. Bonus items, for God's sakes. It really felt like they kind of balanced everything except for that last fight for these harder modes. Now, saying all that, do I think this is a $60 game? Hell no! Look, I really like this game a lot, but wow, this was not worth a $60 purchase. The length of the game definitely hindered it, and even if you try and look at this as a deal in the same way Sonic Mania and Sonic Forces were both $30, but their stories were connected, thus being a $60 deal, since you also get Resident Evil Resistance. Well, that game, if I'm being honest... It's got some major balancing problems, not to mention some of the tech issues and oversights on the creator's part. It's not bad, it can actually be fun, but it doesn't feel finished. That's why I didn't really cover the game in this review. This whole review is more or less talking about Resident Evil 3. Resident Evil 3 is the main reason you're most likely getting this game, and it definitely was my reason for buying it. I came in expecting a reimagining of the 1999 classic, and I was surprised to not just discover a total reimagining, but an absolutely amazing one at that. It does have its problems that hold it back from being even greater than it could be, but overall, it was a fantastic reimagined take on the original. Here's hoping maybe one day we can see a proper classic survival horror game again, but for the time being, Resident Evil 3 will fill that modern survival horror spot for almost everyone. I give this game a 4 out of 5. Man, that actually got a little emotional for me there. I'm not lying when I say I really enjoyed this game, which is something I needed after playing RE2 last year and being severely disappointed with that game. Well, I wonder what I should cover next.
Oh. No.
Oh, no.
Okay, if I'm going to be playing this game, it better be the PC version.